this weekend's contents in 5 minutes, if you can. So, we had a look at the posture we have. We have a wide stance. We still have a bit of a distance in this direction between the feet, so we have like an arch that keeps us upright. So we don't do this or this. We sit more on the rear leg. This allows us to rock back and forth, as it were, so we can manage distance without actually having to take a step. So we combine this with steps, but we can use it as a principle of movement on its own. If we take steps, we have like a flanking step or a side step, if you will. One foot goes to the side, the other goes back, and we can vary them. We can make greater angles towards the center line, and we can make them go backward or forward, depending on where we place the foot that goes first. Okay, then we had a look at the one of the very common blows that we think is common in some buckle fencing, but also sort of shield fencing with triangular shields. It's the one that is, in our opinion, depicted in the manuscript line. This all the time, and we will. For
instance, after a schiltslac, after a successful schiltslac, we often see this position here, and we think that comes from a particular blow that Cornelius is going to explain.
Exactly. So this blow has the main, let's say, power generation by lifting the hand. So my hand is relatively relaxed all the time. Lifting the hand like this, so the sword rotates around the natural point somewhere here on the blade, which is incidentally more or less the point around which it rotates when manipulated by the pommel. So this is the core of the movement. In addition to that, I use my fingers to turn it around to get into the reverse grip, and then it all moves forward. I can like throw it forward, and it sort of has a relaxed but occasionally devastating effect. What it also does, if Roland has a shield in his hand, it allows me to go over the shield or pass by the shield like this. As you can see, my sword is closer now to the camera than the shield, which is why we think this is like the common, or one of the standard blows, you could say, in fighting with shields. We used it in one particular situation where one of the fencers was fleeing back into first ward, and I'm pursuing from half shield. So with half shield, I'm usually going to flee into first ward. I'm following with half shield. This usually closes my center and it allows me to overbind in both directions. But if I see that he doesn't establish a bind, I can follow with this cut. So if you do it in motion, basically I can exploit his hesitation. He goes back, does nothing. I hit, like this. Okay. Then we had a look, okay, what can he do from his position? So half shield is in the center, but he has to find a way around. So what he is doing, according to the manuscripts, verses and the verses which are repeated several times, he falls under or beneath sword and shield. You half shield?
Yeah.
Okay.
Must go.
Okay. So if half shield is there, I immediately establish a bind. So what is important here? I form like a wedge, or like the right half of a wedge, or a kettle scoop. The good thing is, I'm more or less protected now. If he just lets his blade drop towards me, it's sort of deviated to the side. And the bad thing is, he's still in the center. So, and if I assume, or if I want to have some means at hand, if he's idle, if he's not doing an overbind like he should, I can start a thrust. This is per se not in the book, but we want to have the means to do something and not be dependent on his action. So what I'm doing is, I'm taking a side step, which brings me to the side and establishes a new center line. And in this center line, I basically have a line. So what I'm doing here is, I'm really making sure that I have dominance by dropping the point sort of behind his weapon and into the space between his arms. If I have the dominance in the bind, if I have the center, I just form some protection for my hands, and then I go into a thrust. Okay? He has means to do something, of course, and this is what the first play in the book shows us. So as soon as I establish a bind, he can overbind and perform a shield strike, as he should do.
Okay, so it's now Cornelius' turn to put on the mask, because from my half shield, which I have set up in a particular fashion, I'm focusing on my shield, extending the shield forward. This may be indicated in the book with some illustrations where you see that once half shield had been adopted, the sword hand is very slightly trailing, very slightly lower than the shield hand. So we may take this as an indication that we focus on this particular shield edge. Now with the shield strikes, we don't think that shield strikes in general are strikes like vicious blows or anything like that. In fact, we think it's much like working with sword binds, that you are using a superior bind. So here already I have a superior bind with my shield and I could strike at him. It also matches the illustrations in the book where we never see the superior shield covering the inferior overbound shield, shield's boss. Now you can always see the boss of the shield struck party. So the idea that there is an element of force is probably a faulty one, and any force that is being applied in martial arts usually just comes from short tensing up. So my shield strike is more like a short tensing up motion than a vicious strike. Alright, so much for the shield strike that you're going to see in a second. Before that we have the situation half shield versus first ward. The first warder binds and instantly I deal with that. And now I do the same, I bring my sword on top as I start to shift forward for my shield strike. Okay, now interestingly, what we see in the manual is what Cornelius and I see from the top. Only the manual shows us an additional perspective, folding this down so you can see what we see from above. We think that does not mean that you bind down to here. It just shows us important information for a sophisticated or for a refined overbind. This is something you have a lot in medieval illustrations, like people sitting next to each other, shown in profile, and then you see the table from the top, so you see everything they're eating. Or the chessboard, seen from the top. So it's a very typical means of medieval illustrations of giving you additional information. Good. So it might look something like this here. Now you see I took an adjustment step here. I could do my shield strike without a step. I usually do an adjustment step at the very end. Let's look at it again. Here's that particular strike, which would even work if his shield slips out of the bind. If I'm not particularly good at my shield strike, pinning him down, even then I would be able to strike behind the shield as Cornelius has demonstrated beforehand. Yeah, so that's why this strike is superior. Okay, good. So this is what I can do against the first warder. Now the first warder in turn has his own means to deal with that. That was the last part we were looking at. So before we go back looking at thrusting mechanics, you will see how the first warder can respond to being overbound. Yeah?
And so what the book says about it is that obviously the one who overbinds me or counterbinds me, performs a religatio, he is the one who's on top. So in the mutacio gladii is there to change that and make me on top so that he is below. So basically means while his blade is on top of my blade first, what we end up afterwards is just the reversed situation. And calling this a mutation is still something you find in some rapier treatises, if I remember correctly. What I do for this, we go into the same situation. I'm falling on the sort of shield, he has a half shield. So what I'm waiting for now is, so I'm not waiting, so I would, let's say, try to get here, but I'm forcing him to do something. And as soon as I get a reaction from him, like the start and overbind, his leaning forward, for instance, then I disengage and end up here. The disengagement works because I have a very relaxed hand. I drop the point and use the inertia to come back here again. So I feel like the point is like pulling me here again, and it pulls the rest of the blade and the arm. I'm not deliberately doing this from the wrist or from the whole arm or something. This would be too stiff, too slow, and too slow, obviously. As soon as I'm on top, I protect my hand here, and I give a bit of an impulse into his blade to have enough opening for leading my blade between his arms, whereby the weapons are separated, and I aim for the head, which is called nucken.